Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Buenas, this is Francisco Gallardo with the Healing Generations podcast brought to you by the National Compadres Network. I want to take the time to thank all our listeners, our supporters. I appreciate all the feedback that we've been getting. I want to remind you, please share the podcast if you find it useful, you find it inspirational, you like listening to the stories. Please support it by writing a review. Various platforms, either you're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, they all have their different ways, but whatever you listen to podcasts on, please rank it and give it a short review. It really does help people find the podcast. So if you could do that, it'd be great. But before we get started, we always have to take time to thank the creator and bring in the four directions in a good way. We want to let our ancestors know what we're doing, and we want to make sure that people take the time out of their life. I know we're all busy, but you always got to think about the shoulders that we stand on. So I want everyone to take a deep breath, and I want you to face the east, even if it's just in your mind. And I want you to think about all the men in your life, all the men, your grandfather, your father, your dad, your uncle, a significant man, a mentor, a boss, your brother, your son, your homies. I want you to think about them, all the things that they go through, all the blessings that they bring to us. The essence of what being a man is about is important. And it's not just about your gender, it's about how you carry yourself at the end of the day. And then I want you to turn around and face the west. But as you're doing that, I want you to think about all our relatives in between that don't fit just with the men and are not quite with the women. They're in between. We want to acknowledge that spectrum. We want to make sure our relatives feel good there, that they know that they're appreciated, and I want them to feel blessed. And as you're facing the west, we want to think about our grandmothers, our moms, our daughters, all the women in our life, our tias, even those supporters, our own mentors. I was mentored by many women in my life, and I'm thankful for them. All the lessons they taught me. I want you to think about even your colleagues, your coworkers that are women, all the things that they provide and the things that they go through, the negative and the positive, that when we have a conversation, we remember them in that way and try to think about what would they say? What would they want? And then I want you to turn around, go in your left, all the way till you reach the north, and we think about all our ancestors, our elders that laid the groundwork for us, that they were praying for us even though we weren't even born yet, how they want to make the generation better. And our ancestors that laid that groundwork spiritually, they laid that work politically, a lot of different ways. We want to recognize them. And our elders that are, as we approach the winter, we're in late fall, getting close to winter, it changes. A lot of our elderly people are lonely. Please talk to them. Check in on them. Check on your tia, check on your grandparents, check on your neighbor. Let's show our elders that we love them and we care about them, and they're still a blessing to us. And not just take their wisdom, but we also honor them in a good way. And then I want you to continue left until you reach the south. And I want you to think about all the generations that are not even born yet. As we do that work that we say we do in the community, that we honor all the children in our lives, even from the ones not being born yet to the teenagers. They're still babies. They're still young. Their brains ain't even fully developed, but we want to think about them. We want to help them grow. And all the beauty that they bring in. I mean, my granddaughters and my daughters, and they really bring me joy in a good way. And I want all our young people to feel loved and wanted and feel blessed. And as we turn around, again, we think about Mother Earth, Don Unseen, all the things that she goes through in life that we do in our life to make the world change, the climate crisis that we're in, that we think about Don Unseen. We think about Mother Earth in a good way and do what we can. Whatever little effort you're doing, keep it up. We want to show the young people that we care and that we want our environment to be good for us, And then we also want to acknowledge the sun, Tonantiu, that the sun, the grandfather, shines upon us, but it also represents that hope. It represents the light in our life. Sometimes a lot of us, even right now, you might be facing darkness, but we know that sun is there, and it's that reflection. We want to think about that, and through that sun, the warmth that we feel, it provides nourishment for us, for our bodies, for our mind, but it also provides that nourishment for all the plants that provide food for us. It's that combination of the sun and Don Unseen's water that allows us to have nourishment. So we want to think about all that. And then, of course, we want to acknowledge the Creator. Whatever you believe, however you want to say it, acknowledge the Creator just for life, the miracle of life, and how beautiful it is that we're alive, and that, sometimes things get tough, but life is good. And I just want everybody to take time and think about that. I want you to take a deep breath. Just take that time to relax and reflect a little bit on your own life and your own healing journey. So with that, I want to thank everyone for taking that little bit of time so we can reflect. I have a special guest today. I consider her a good friend, a thought partner in the community. She does a lot of things that I appreciate. So I want to introduce Olga Gonzalez. I don't know your whole name, how you do it, Olga, but I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself. But can you share a little bit about yourself, your family, your background, and your journey up to this point in life?
Yes, Cisco, I also consider you a good friend and a brother in community, and appreciate all the good work that you do, and honored to have been invited to be on this podcast with you to share some of my experiences. And I pray that these will benefit other people who are your listeners. So yes, my full name is actually Olga Alegría Vianey Gonzalez Rodriguez, as we do in Mexico. That's where I was born. My family is from San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato. I was born in Monterrey, Nuevo León. And then I like to say that I was imported into Los Angeles when I was 4. So my family background, we have a history on both sides of this imposed border. On my father's side, we have Yaqui and Otomi. And so he tells me how his grandfather was taken and enslaved, and he worked in the silver mines of Guanajuato. So then that great-grandfather was renamed Juan Cortés, para acabarla, that name. And he married my grandmother. I think he resisted learning too much Spanish and a lot of that imposed Christianity, and then they were married, and so he married into the Otomi community there. And on my mother's side, it's mostly Otomi. And so I identify as an indigenous person who was born in Mexico, and I'm back on this side of the border, just like our ancestors did since the beginning of time, before these borders were imposed on us and countries were created. I'm also a mother, which is a role that I take very seriously. I have 3 children. My oldest is 22. He's my son. And then I have 2 younger daughters who are 12 and 9. And they're already fierce, and they're already doing community work, and I love it. I'm also a wife. My husband also works in community spaces, and his name is Malik Robinson. And yeah, I've been working in the nonprofit space here in Colorado for the past going on 29 years already. Always working in community spaces, always thinking of how we can help to bring about healing and liberation and, collective work that is dedicated to honoring our ancestors and their teachings, as well as to thinking about the next 7 generations and beyond. So Right now, I'm the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Cultivando. And we have an amazing team. We're all women. All 9 of us are women, are all Mexicanas, or most of us were born in Mexico. And we address health equity issues. We do policy advocacy, uplift the leadership of our community with a special focus on our community members who are Spanish speaking, mostly from Mexico, but also other Latin American countries. And I do this work to honor my parents and the sacrifices they made for us.
Mm.
I think as a little girl, as the oldest child of Mexicanos who are first to come to the US in recent history, I was the first one to learn English. And you know how that goes. You learn English, you become the family interpreter. Sometimes, as George Lopez says, kind of like the team leader, right? So everybody comes to you for everything. And so as a young interpreter, you also become aware of injustices. So you're put in these adult situations sometimes where you're not just interpreting, but suddenly you're also advocating for your family, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember being undocumented for many years, and then amnesty allowed us to become residents. And I did a lot of our paperwork. I was like in middle school, and then later for my tias and tios, their citizenship paperwork. And so a lot of responsibilities when we're the first, right, to learn English and help navigate the systems that were not made for us. And anyway, I think that I'm still sort of doing what I did as a little girl. I'm still advocating for our community, helping us navigate, helping us elevate our voice. So I do that in honor of my parents and their sacrifices. And I think of other families that are coming in new also who are going through the same things. And so it's my hope that they don't have as hard of a time as some of us did.
Yeah, I appreciate that. My family was the same way. My mom coming from Mexico and not really understanding how the United States works,
Mm-hmm.
how society works, relationships, all that type of thing. And I see my mom go through that, sometimes alone, sometimes just frustrated. And as a kid, you help out,
Mm-hmm.
but it was at very 2 different worlds, and then my auntie, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
More families come, and I remember my auntie having a whole different name, and I'm like, "What? That's not her name." And my mom's like, "Cállate, you don't know what you're talking about." I'm like, "What?" But yeah, it's the things we have to go through. So I appreciate what you did for your family. I appreciate that because I mean, it was preparing you for what you're doing now in a lot of ways, which is beautiful in that way. But I want to ask you, what does healing mean to you?
That is a beautiful question, Cisco. I think I've been reflecting on that quite a bit. I think that our generation is trying to figure out what healing looks like to us. I think our ancestors didn't have the luxury of thinking, hey, I need some me time or I need to engage in self care. I think oftentimes we come from a history of survival and sacrifice. And I think of my own family history, and I think of how my parents sacrificed for me and how I was expected to sacrifice for them and for community. And so the idea of healing was kind of new to me, although I knew it was important. And I know that it
Mm,
involves so many things. So on a community level, we can heal when we decide that we are worthy of it. We are worthy of taking that time to rest, to recharge, to experience joy, and to just be. I think as quote unquote, I don't consider us immigrants. I think we know we're indigenous people, but when you have that label, you're always held to a higher standard. You have to be exemplary. You have to be excellent. You cannot ever be mediocre. So stopping to think about my healing is something I'm really excited about. So it looks like on a community level, I think we do healing when we do good work in community. Maybe we're not curanderos or these healers per se, but when we do work that helps people have an easier life, when we do work that brings people together, when we do work that helps people realize their power and their potential, and then they feel like they could go out and transform systems, that is healing and powerful in whatever way we do it, whether you do it through the arts or through community work or through advocacy or whatever that might look like. Thankfully, many of us have these traditional ways to go to. And so I've always participated in ceremonias, sweat lodges, Sundance, all the things that our ancestors preserved for us and gave their life so that we could still have. I was a danzante for many years, and that was medicine for me. Dance is medicine. Music can be medicine for me. I love to dance. I love to sing. I'm not a good singer, but I like to sing anyway. I think spending time with people I love and care about is healing. It's not giving away my time and energy to just everyone and everything. So learning to say no can be healing. And from all the work that I've done and all the ceremonias I've been a part of, I realized that I needed to take time to hold ceremonia for myself.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't stop to heal, your body is going to kick your butt. You're going to experience it. You might have a headache, you might have anxiety, you might have pains that you're just like, where is this coming from? And I'm hearing that from a lot of friends in community spaces too. And so one day when it got really bad and I ended up going to emergency rooms and here and in Mexico to try to diagnose what it is that I have, and they couldn't find a reason and they couldn't find a cure. So I remembered we have traditional tools to turn to. We have our own medicinas. And one day I finally locked myself in my room, burned my copal, turned off the lights, and I did a ceremony for myself, which is something I hadn't done. And so I connected with my body to see what it was telling me. And Cisco, I'll tell you, we all can do this. And I had my mother, rest in peace, who passed 4 years ago. She came to me at that time and she gave me some powerful words that gave me permission. And she said, it's okay for you to rest. You don't have to do so much. It's okay to take time for you. And you understand this, but my mother from the other side said it's okay. And so I've started to make those changes. And so I feel like rather than saying things like I'm sick or I'm this or that, I say I'm healing and I'm on this healing journey. So started to do my exercising again. And, you probably know I taught Zumba for many, many years. That was my medicine. And then I was in a car accident and then I hurt my leg. So then I couldn't do that. And, just actually this week, I started going for my jogs and I started thinking about what I was putting in my body, what I was eating and taking some time to rest and not working 12, 14-hour days if I can avoid it. So I think it's all of that. And I think that healing looks very different for different people. And I pray that we all find what that is for us.
I think that's beautiful. I like what you said about turning that healing inward. I mean, I think a lot of people that we know and work with in the community, healing it reminds me of it's kind of like love, right? Everybody wants love. Everybody wants healing. But real love takes work. You have to put your ego aside a lot of times if you really want to have that ultimate trust with one another, have that feeling. And the same thing is about healing. You have to you can't go halfway with it. You have to really lean into it and almost give yourself to it. And then you'll start to feel those blessings. It took me a while. I was good with doing it for other people, but to do it for myself, there was a little bit of me that felt I wasn't worthy enough. I don't know what it is. There's something about when we do work in the community, in the nonprofit sector or whatever, we almost say it's all good for everybody else, but not me. I can't do that because somehow that's selfish. And I'm really happy to hear that you turn that around. I know with your kids, like all the different things you go through, and it's a beautiful journey. So with that in mind, what are the lessons that you learned from your culture, your family, your experiences along the way that helped you in this healing journey and development? Because I think a lot of people, they want to do that, but they don't even know where to start. I've had people ask me, I mean, yes, we have ceremonies like danza, we have, velaciones, we have sweat lodge, we have various things. But for me, healing could be, sometimes it's Like when you're having a bad day, listening to your old, listening to your songs that kind of think about a good time. I mean, there's many different levels of healing, but what were those lessons for you?
Gosh, I think there's so many lessons, and it helps to, one, to take that time, like what you shared you did too, to reflect on maybe who you are. What is this thing holding you up from thinking you're worthy of rest? And I think it goes back to, this culture of sacrifice, or when you're in a leadership role, you're supposed to make the sacrifices for other people, right? A lot of our prayers, like, it's sacrifice. You go into sweat lodge, you're sacrificing your body. You do flesh offerings, you fast, all the things that you do. And especially in a leadership role, it's like you come last, community comes first. You will work the extra hours so other people can rest, and I think it's kind of in our DNA. That's how we got to where we are. If our ancestors said, hey, I'm just going to rest, I don't think I'm going to go look for food or go into the temazcal or whatever it is. I mean, I think it's just we've been going for so long that we don't know how to stop. And so for me, it was reflecting on my family history, and even thinking about our historical trauma, right? So even though I wasn't alive in the times where my ancestors were enslaved and forcibly relocated, removed from their homeland, on the one side, the Yaqui people were being also hunted down by Mexicans, and then the white settlers. And so I can't help but think it's like you're always on alert. It's like your DNA, people look like you, but they're not treating you in a way that speaks to our humanity. So for me, it was acknowledging that history. And it's almost like you're running a marathon and you're always running because you're being chased. And then one day you look back and say, no one's chasing me anymore, or it's slowed down a bit. Like, you don't have to keep going because it's not healthy. It's not sustainable. And so I take pride in that history of not just focusing on the trauma, but our history of victory. Like, we've overcome things, and we are here because our ancestors had these ways, and they had this love, and they had to take time to spend with their family and to create art and all of the beautiful things that they've inherited to us. And so I feel like I take pride in that history of victory, that attitude of si se puede. I come from people who survived slavery, relocation, crossing a border, being dehumanized, to where I am now. And I realize there's still a fight, but I don't have to fight as hard all of the time. And when I think about my ancestors, it's very popular to say, this is my ancestors' wildest dream, y no sé qué tanto, all these things. I actually feel that our ancestors' wildest dream is for us to rest, to take it easy a little bit, because we're not generally daily facing life or death, generally. I know there's exceptions. And so I think focusing on those beautiful things about our cultura, the lessons from our history, leaning into valuing what's important to me, and that's my familia, whether my blood familia or my chosen familia, and being open to the love that they give me. Even my coworkers are my work family, and they're the ones that say, Olga, you need to rest. Or how come, if you're going on vacation, you better leave your laptop, don't be sending emails. And so they are giving me sort of that permission and that space to do that. And I think of even growing up in LA, or whenever you grow up in a city where tensions are high, where you've got gangs, or even if you're not in a gang, just that attitude, right? It's like the survival attitude that disconnect us from one another. And so sometimes I like to say my inner chola comes out and helps me navigate certain things where I have to show up in that way, like a warrior. But sometimes I gotta tell that inner chola to move aside, because now I want the healer to step in. I want the nurturer to step in, and I want to allow that to happen. And I thank that warrior chola spirit for getting me this far. And I thank her for being around when I need her, because Creator knows I need her time to time. But other times I could just go to that nurturing, that feminine energy, that healing energy that tells me, Olga, it's okay to rest. It's okay to say no and to ask others to help you, and to allow people to love on me and to take care of me and to do things for me. And that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but it's a sign of wisdom and humility. And so I'm leaning more into that now in my life where I'm at now.
I appreciate that because I think just the way you looked at it, I mean, for me, I feel the same way. I mean, that's why I love when people like us are talking about this, because sometimes you feel alone in leadership positions in the community. And, people have always told me you need to chill out, relax a little bit. And I prided myself in working the hardest. No, I always said, no rest for the wicked, and the righteous don't need
Mm-hmm.
none. And I always felt like I'm doing righteous work. If I'm tired, it's a good sacrifice. You know what I mean? But at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, that does catch up with you. And
Mm-hmm.
so I believe in what you say. We have to rest. But how do you pass on these teachings? You're married, you have children, both of you are in the community. How do you balance all that together and making sure you're giving those healing messages and values over to your children?
Another great question. And I think we still work through it because for me, I'm in the first generation in my family to have a quote unquote professional role, right? I come from people who worked in sweat lodges and who worked in the fields. And, I think back then it was difficult and it seemed like life was a little simpler. Obviously, the cost of living wasn't what it is today, where you could have a one income household and have a house and have nice things and not worry. Um, I think for me, it's like sharing with my children the work that I'm doing so that they know if I'm working long hours, this is why I'm doing that. Or I invite my children to come with me. I let them know why I'm doing the work that I'm doing in community. And so one of my biggest sources of pride was one time my 12-year-old Chimalma, she said, "Mom, what do you do?" And I was explaining it to her, and she's seen me in action in community. And she says, one day I want to do what you do. So for me, that was like, I'm doing something right. Like, thank goodness. I don't want her to be like, I don't want to work like you and be sick like you and not get paid like you. So it's also bringing the children in to help them understand and sharing our story, our family history, so they know where we come from and that they never forget that.
Mm,
For me, it was like, as an Indigenous child, it does come with certain responsibilities. You take care of community, you serve elders first, the sort of modeling what those expectations are. And I think whenever possible, both my husband and I try to include our children. I mean, my husband works at a, dance studio. It's a international, world renowned sort of dance ensemble and school. And so my kids get to hang out there a lot. I mean, that's a better place than hanging out with me sometimes. I admit it.
mhm.
And they could dance there. They could be with children who look like them and they see us both in action. So I think that that's important. And whenever we can and we have to travel for work, we bring them with us as well. Again, with my husband, with Malik, like this weekend, he has work out of town and we're making plans for who can pick up and drop off the kids so you can come with me because it's so easy to get so caught up in the work that you lose sight of who you're doing it for. I don't want
Mm.
to be known as somebody who did good work in community but neglected my family. And I think that like our ancestors in the Chicano movement, they did it at great sacrifice of their family, of their health,
Yes.
and the partners and the children had to share them with the world and hardly got to see them. And so I appreciate those sacrifices that they made. And I want to be able to do good work in community while still being a very present and loving mother, while still being there for my partner, while still being there for my family. And so I think it's really having those conversations about why are we doing this work? Who are we doing it for? And is our work and our family life and our relationship in alignment with that? And I'm not saying we get it perfect. I think we're trying to figure it out as we go because we are in a unique situation where we're both executive directors of nonprofits
Mhm.
and are expected to not just do that work, but to show up in community spaces. And, sometimes I'll admit I forgot about a parent teacher conference, because we were busy doing something else with the kids, but, and not beating ourselves up too much because we can't be super parents, super EDs, super community members. I mean, something sometimes has to give. And so just giving value to those things that are important to us, I think helps us stay focused.
Yeah, that's important. That balance. I mean, you said as a parent, I've seen people that I know and love in the community, and their kids went wild. And when I was young, I saw that, and I was like, I definitely do not want that to happen. Even
Hmm.
my kids, the older ones, when they were in middle school, because that's like for me was a pivotal age, right? You start acting up, you start being curious, your hormones are raging. I locked them down. I was like, you're my number one right now. No matter
Hmm.
what's going on, I have to keep you on task so that you could be a good adult and do all the things that you want to do in life. And that's
Hmm.
part of the healing journey, because I think part of it too was making sure our kids, if I could, they don't have to go through the same things I did, protecting them in a little bit of that. And they kind of
Hmm.
grow up in a sheltered way, but I always wanted them to reflect. It's like, yeah, we do all these beautiful things because of other people too. This isn't just,
Hmm.
this is just a part of that journey. So in that healing, what you do with your organization, you explained a little bit about what you do, but how do you promote healing there? I mean, beyond just providing service, because I think a lot of nonprofits, they're kind of in between that, where they provide a service and some people have a bad attitude about it. Like, oh, they don't even realize how much time I have to raise money. And I'm not saying you're like that, but there are people
Hmm.
like that. But I know, you try to do it a different way. How do you introduce healing to them, to the clients, the people within your program? I don't like the word client, but people you serve,
Hmm.
your community.
Hmm.
How do you help them show a little bit of healing? Because I think people start to define themselves based on the problems they face, not on
Hmm.
the beauty that they have within them, feeling sacred, feeling all those things. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to infusing our traditional indigenous ways. And there's been a lot in the news about the anti-indigeneity within our community, right? So personally, I feel that a lot of our healing, we already have the tools and that wisdom that was passed on. Sometimes in our community, we don't give it much value. We think it's superstitious. We think it's something, you know, anti God, or, sometimes, just burning some copal, people think it's like witchcraft or something like that. So for me, it was showing up as my full self. And
Mm,
having worked in the nonprofit industrial complex my whole life, I learned from the best what not to do, right? So it sounds contradictory, but I've had the worst bosses, the worst supervisors. I worked in the most oppressive systems, and some of these were led by people of color. It wasn't just white folks that were inflicting harm, but I came from, you probably remember too. I think we're the same age. We have the same birthday, same year.
yes.
Um, so there was a time where there was no such thing as like mental health and self-care and personal days at work. We come from the generation where we got sick, unless you're bedridden, you're showing up to work. And if you're not coming, you got to show a doctor's note, right? You have to have an excuse. And then coming from people who never worked in professional settings, I thought you work until you die. Like I used to go to work with a fever and, body aches. And I just didn't know I had the option of staying home, or I think back of how much time I was away from my family because they're still in California. I was the one that came here by myself, right out of
Mm,
college. And then I have family in Mexico. And I think back to all the years I wasn't there for special occasions because my work. Why? Because you have to earn vacation days, you have to earn sick days, and you never really earn enough money to travel, much less to take that much time off, to spend quality time with your family. So I think I took all of those lessons and all the times that I was silenced and all the times that I supported the leadership and never got the pay or the title to back up the work that I was doing. And I just was like, I was ready to leave the nonprofit space. I was burnt out. I ended up in the emergency room with anxiety. Like it
mm.
was horrible. And then I had been on the board of Cultivando for a number of years, and the executive director moved to Guatemala to work with indigenous people there. And as a board member, she asked if I'd come and take the role. And I said, oh, heck no, I'll come in interim and I'll help you find somebody. I'll be here a few months. And the reason I agreed to do it again But the staff said to me, we know you're qualified, but we want you to take this position because you're one of us. And that was like, okay, my community's asking me to step into this role. They showed up to the board meeting and advocated, said, we want Olga. Like, we don't even want you to look anywhere else. She's already involved. We know her, all of the things. So it was a beautiful thing. And here I am 4 years later, still like cultivando. But I brought in all those experiences and said, this is not what I want to do. And I think I didn't want to be an executive director because all of my executive director friends are sick. They're not eating right. They're not sleeping right. They don't spend time for themselves, for their family. And why would I want to join that club, right? All that
Yes.
responsibility, and the pay isn't even what it should be. And that's a whole other TED Talk for sure. But I came in saying, no, you all are, as promotoras, as women in this community, I have a lot to learn from you. I bring my own skill sets, but we're going to balance this out. We're going to learn from each other. And we moved into our office and I set up my altar. And I'm like, this is a grounding space for us. Our ancestors are here. If the day is hard, put your prayers into the fire. We can hold space for that. So seeing that they embraced that, and it brought back memories for them of ceremonies they participated in Mexico with their abuelitas, so feeling seen, feeling grounded in our heritage, I think is part of healing. I also rewrote our promotora curriculum, and I'm including elements of our indigenous teachings and what it means to care for ourselves and our community, because we know that our self-care is not just selfish, but it's collective. We heal better together. I'm not going to feel good if one of my coworkers isn't feeling good, and I also recognize the whole person that comes into work. They're not just a promotora. They're also a member of a community. They're also a mother, a wife, a daughter. So for us, it's not uncommon for them to say, hey, Friday, I can't come in because I'm a madrina for a quinceañera and I have to go set up. And I'm like, do what you got to do. And the rest of the team has your back. Or I have to go to Mexico because my mom's in the hospital. We make space for that. I never count the days that they've earned for sick or vacation. I think it's ridiculous. I'm like, I don't know how many days you're sick this year. You may not be sick at all. You might be sick for a month. You're going to take the time off. You need to take care of yourself and your family. And so coming to work knowing that they're not being judged in that way, I think is a way that we bring in that healing. I think is bringing in the whole person. We also have workshops that support salud emocional, and we bring in speakers. We bring in everything from therapists from our community who understand the culture to curanderos and elders to talk to them about healing ways. And so those are ways that I try to infuse it. What I'm working on is modeling that time off that I said for myself, but I'm slowly moving in that direction. And our metrics, as they say in this space, for how do we know we did a good job? And I tell them, if at the end of the day, your mother, your abuelita would feel proud of the work you did, then you're doing a good job. And that's it.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that, man. You said a lot. And I think two things stuck out to me. One, allowing them, to get reacquainted with their own culture. Because I think a lot of our people, especially for our Mexicanos, and even some Chicanos in a lot of ways, or other Latinos, they know who they are, but they also been blinded by colonization, their role in society, what we see on TV. And it's hard to say, no, we can accept all of us, our indigeneity, the things that we use, as to make ourselves feel good. It's sad that almost everybody I know in the nonprofit space has anxiety issues. I remember I was 30 years old when I got hit with it, and I was like, oh my God, what's going on? I'm having a heart attack. And the doctor was like, no, you have anxiety. I was like, what? What's that? And then my friend Felipe has it. Then Jojo has it. Then other friends have it. And I'm like, wow, like that's one part of the nonprofit world we need to change. I mean, in all across our communities, we need to put forth the social emotional needs of our community and our family members. And we need to normalize taking care of yourself. You know what I mean? And I think that's a hard part. And I'm glad in the promotora kind of model, it is being that promoter of health, but giving out really good information and modeling it. You know, it's not enough just to say it. You have to do it, right? If you're going to utilize the Comadre network or however you're going to do it, you have to make sure that it's that love. And then the second part of how you try to bring it up with yourself and build it in your own life and to model it. I think it's even just acknowledging people too, right? Acknowledging your workers, say, man, we care about you and we want you to be all right. It's not just about what you produce for me.
Exactly.
Or for the organization or for our mission. I want you to feel good about what you're doing because that's going to show a lot more. So that's beautiful. So what counsel would you give to others in our same age group, right? That are maybe they're not an executive director yet because you've been more of the ground worker before that. And I remember you in that role. And it's kind of one of those weird things. You're working hard, but you can't make all the hard decisions. You sneak in your values here and there, you know, to get things done for the organization, but they don't totally appreciate you. But there's a lot of people that are in that Yalder position, right? They're doing the work, they're doing all that, but they don't know where to. One is to be ambitious, but also take care of yourself. You know what I mean? Like, and also speak up for healing ways within our community. What advice would you give to them? The young Olgas out there that are trying to make a difference, you know, and that's really driving them.
Yeah, I think it's important to surround yourself with good people that share your values, that you could be vulnerable with too, and to say, hey, I'm having this issue right now, like I'm feeling anxiety or I feel like I can't do this. Like create your support network of people that will uplift you when you need to take a break. They'll fill in for you. They'll cheer for you when you're having successes too. Like you don't want a bunch of envidiosos around you either, because that just sabotages your work and those aren't real friends anyway. I think also seeking out, you know, whatever works for your own healing, because you want to be in this work for the long run, right? Because this is, for a lot of us, it's not a profession, but it's really our calling, you know? We're going to continue to do this until we take our last breath, and maybe even as ancestors still coaching through dreams or ceremonia, you know? I don't think we'll ever rest. So I know, you know, and hearing, you know, some of the people you mentioned, like Felipe and Jojo, like I'm also happy to see that we have a lot more healing circles happening in our community, so people could come and be vulnerable and invest in each other's healing and in each other's growth. And I'm part of Círculos too. Sometimes I participate, sometimes I facilitate, and I do it for my team. And I think for me, like in my organization, I'm invested in the professional and personal development of everyone on my team. And I say, you're not always going to be here at Cultivando. So I want you to learn as much as I can. So all of my promotoras now know like things that are like grant writing and reporting. They weren't a part of that before. If we're meeting with funders, they're coming with me. If I'm asked to go somewhere where we're networking, they're going with me. If we're receiving an award, we're all going. You know, I look for funding to support our self-care. So we take nice retreats, you know, every year to give us a break, to check in with each other, to hold a healing circle where we could cry and release all the things. You know, I had my team, I had sent them the Spanish speaking promotoras to Durango here in Colorado. And if you're not from here, it's still pretty cowboy over there, you know. We're not super visible. And so there's still, think of cowboy, big trucks, Confederate flags, Trump supporters. That is where we do some work because our community is there too. And so I sent them on their own for the first time to go facilitate a workshop, and they were treated very poorly because of who they are. They were told not to speak Spanish on the plane. People were coughing on them and not wearing masks, you know, and they told me, they came back and I was so upset. I was so upset. And then I hear them say things like, well, maybe, you know, or we're lucky that we were allowed to go to these spaces. And I'm like, you are not lucky. You belong here. And so then I go the opposite end and I'm like, you know what? We have enough money saved up for retreats. I ended up buying us first class tickets on an airplane to San Francisco. They wanted to visit a winery. They wanted to see all the things. I took them to a 5-star restaurant, you know, because I wanted to kind of help them see that they do deserve this and they do belong here. So for me, that's advice too, is like find people who believe in you, who want to see you be better. Those people that open doors and keep them open for you, not slam them after they get in. Because unfortunately, we have a lot of envidia in our community. We have people taking credit for the work of others. We have people positioning themselves as healers when they're actually the ones causing harm and the reason we need the limpias. So we gotta move away from that and support each other and support our healing and our growth. And we have to see each other like this, like an investment in you is an investment in our community. It doesn't take anything away from me to uplift you, you know, and we know that true leaders help to cultivate other leaders. We know when to step up and when to step back. And I think some people haven't learned that, or we think we're the only ones that could do a job, and we stay in a toxic environment because we feel we can't get another job, or because we feel nobody else is going to do the work like us. And so we got to move away from that thinking and know that if we move on, somebody else is going to come in and do the job, and maybe even better than you. And it's okay to step away from those situations. We don't have to sacrifice ourselves to that extent. And the work will always be there. If you do good work in community, you will always have a job because people will look out for you. And so we have to trust in
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one lesson young people need to hear, definitely, that are coming up is, yeah, when it's toxic, don't stay there because things are going to
Mm-hmm.
change. Do what you have to do to take care of
Mm-hmm.
yourself and grow. You know what I mean? As always, in leadership roles, it took me a while to learn. The more you invest in them, the harder they're going to work, not just for you, but for themselves. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
have pride in it. They're going to feel good about it. And eventually they might leave, but don't make them feel guilty. Let them leave in a good way, because you never know when you might see them again and cultivate that relationship. It's important, that we do that as leaders as we get older. But I just want to say to all those yalders out there too, think about what some of the things that Olga said regarding taking care of yourself for real, like really taking that time and every so often evaluate your situation and where you could go, and not let those roadblocks hit you. And even in our own culture where we're learning about kind of reconnecting in a lot of way, reimagining, but our culture is also a live culture. So we can create our own ceremonias in the future too. We
Mm-hmm.
don't just have to rely on the past, that we still have whatever we need to do through our ancestors. We could do it too. We
Mm-hmm.
could think of new ways to appreciate one another. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
like that, and appreciate your life. So with that, Olga, I want to just say thank you so much, for taking the time to talk about healing, to talk about your journey, sharing the wisdom that you have. I really do value it, because I've seen you blossom over the years. I mean, you already had, I think when I first met you at a call, you already had a spark, but I know you've been through some things too to get you where you're at now. I think all throughout my life anyway, I've been humbled different times in my life to help me reorientate me. I think I know healing, and then something else comes my way and teaches me another lesson. I know
Mm-hmm.
you're like that too. So good blessing to you and your husband and your children, your son and your daughters. I really, even the journey that you've had with your family, it's beautiful. So is there any last thing that people, if they want to get in touch with you, they want to learn more about your organization, how could people follow more things about Olga?
Yeah, so our organization, we're still building our website, but it's, you could see it. It's www.cultivando.org. And you can reach me. It's easy, Olga at cultivando.org. And I thank you for this opportunity. And I want to tell our people to never forget where they come from. Remember who you come from. And remember that we have still so much that we can still contribute and do on behalf of our descendants and to honor our ancestors. And if you get stuck in a job and you feel guilty, remember that you don't work for that organization, you work for your community. And trust that wherever you go, you're still going to be working for community. So don't feel guilted into staying at a job that is not seeing you and uplifting you and making you feel joy and pride at the end of the day, because you deserve it. And we deserve rest. And again, I feel our ancestors' wildest dream is to see us happy and thrive. and to live good lives that are not full of the same level of sacrifice that they made. So blessings to all, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again. So, with that, I want to thank all our listeners again. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. I don't know if you're driving, you're at work, or whatever you're doing, but please take care of yourself. Think about that and be good to people. It's all right to tell people, that you love them, you care about them, and you want the best for them. I know sometimes for not just for men too, it's for women, for all people that are, sometimes we've been hurt in our lives and we have a hard time showing love. And there's also people who are very loving, but inside are hurting too. And they're so prideful, they don't want to let people know. So just because you think, oh, they're right, they got it together, still tell them you love them, you appreciate them. Mm-hmm. Believe me, they're gonna feel good about that too. So again, if you want to leave us a review, or maybe you have a guest in mind that you think we should interview, please, in the comments, you could go to our website, nationalcompadresnetwork.org, and you could go there and see all the different things that we're doing in the community. And it's a beautiful thing. So until next time, palabra.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.